Gods of the theatre, smile on us.
You who sit up there stern in judgment, smile on us.
You who look down on actors, and who doesn't, bless this yearly festival and smile on us. We offer you song and dance.
Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of Thespis in the Green Room. It's Bruce and Melanie here.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well, thanks for asking. And here we are doing this thing remotely again. I guess remote is the name of the game for a little while.
That is what is happening in the world now. Yes,
It is,
indeed.
goodness. Yeah, it's just becoming the norm. I don't think anything of it. I don't think anything different. I think this is just how it is, and it's the same with work, and it's kind of weird
Yeah.
that it's now the new normal. Anyway,
It is.
thankfully, technology allows us to still do this. We don't have to just kind of bag it.
Yeah. It's nice that we can carry on.
That's right.
So that's a good segue because we're having to do the podcast completely remote
Mm-hmm.
these days, which we've done in the past,
Right,
but now it's a given. that
Right,
it's
right.
remote
Before
now.
we kind of did it because it just, people were kind of scattered about and it was one way to bring it together because we had to in proximity. Now, even if you are close together, you still do this. You know what I mean? You still use techniques and technology to record because getting together isn't, the best thing, I guess, or the safest of things.
Right.
Yeah.
And another thing that's gone online is, of course, theater, which we've
Mhm.
talked about in previous episodes
Uh-huh.
about all the online offerings. But today we're going to talk about a very specific online offering. We're going to talk about the biggest theater festival in the world, the Edinburgh Festival Fringe.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I know we've kind of talked a little bit about it before, but I'm really looking forward to this because I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about it as well. But this word fringe, we throw that around, and even in our local theater community, we throw the word fringe with fringe series and fringe festivals and fringe portions of a season. And so I'm kind of curious about this word and how it kind of fits into this whole festival that's the biggest festival in the world type of thing.
Yeah, fringe is a word that we're hearing quite a bit. A lot of theater companies are saying they have a fringe series or a fringe season.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is your take on the word fringe? What does that mean to you?
Well, when I think of fringe, I think about a vest that my mother made me, 40 years ago for Christmas. And it was a cowboy boy, fringe with vest with fringe hanging off. And my brother and I each had one. And mine was brown and his was green leather. And it was the coolest thing. That's when I think of fringe, that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Okay, well, that is one definition of the word.
But I think of it as ornamentation, extras,
Mhm.
things you find on a pillow, everything on the outside, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So that is one definition, but there are other definitions,
Hmm.
and you have Merriam-Webster
I
in
do.
front of you.
Yes, I'm pulling it up right now, and
What do
it
they
is
say?
kind of like saying what we did. It says an ornamental border consisting of short, straight, or twisted threads or strips hanging from cut or raveled edges or from a separate band.
Is that the only definition they have?
I mean, there's another definition here. It says something that is marginal, additional, or secondary to some activity, process, or subject.
The irony of that, when you think of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, is hilarious that you would think it was marginal or secondary to
I
anything
know, because
because
it's the biggest thing in the
it's,
world,
it's the
right?
biggest theater festival in the
Yeah.
world. But it didn't start out that way.
Hmm.
It wasn't. It was indeed the fringe of a different festival. And people forget this, or they don't even know this, because it's in and of itself is such an entity now. It's fringe because it was the fringe of a whole different festival.
So, what was the other festival? What was going on?
Okay. So
History
let's
lesson 101, theater history 101.
exactly. So if we jump in our time machine, doodaloo, 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 and we go back to Edinburgh, Scotland, 1947.
Hmm.
That's when this all began. So in 1947, a different festival was being launched. It was called the Edinburgh International Festival.
Okay.
And it was going to be a curated festival of select international performing groups coming together in Edinburgh and performing.
So something probably pretty special, I would think.
Yeah, it was a finite number of people
Hmm.
or number of performing groups were invited, and they were taking over all the major venues in Edinburgh.
Okay.
So, and the festival director was the one, I'm sure, with the help of a board or an advisory group, issued these invitations and invited these performing groups to bring their theater pieces to Edinburgh for this festival. Well, that's great. But there were 8 theater companies that showed up in Edinburgh uninvited.
Oh, wow. Okay. So do you think
They
this was done kind of like, we're going to go anyway, that type of thing? Do you think that's kind of what the premise was?
I don't know if it
You
was
know?
so much that. I don't know if it was so much that. I don't it almost sounds like they were snubbed or something and they showed up and they
Ah,
were like, "Well,
okay.
screw you, we're coming
Right.
anyway."
Okay.
I don't know that it was quite that attitude about it. I think it was more of a genius marketing ploy
Hmm.
because they knew, these other theater companies knew, that for a few weeks in Edinburgh were going to be all these theater patrons coming to see the shows, these fabulous shows that had been curated and
Hmm.
were, top shelf, top level shows.
Right.
And they thought, well, this is great. I mean, people are going to be in the market to buy tickets and see shows, and they're all going to be there in this one location at this time. Let's go capitalize on that.
Ah, yeah.
So these 8 groups brought their own shows, and they took on, alternative venues, either smaller venues or churches or restaurants or halls or whatever they could get. And they mounted their shows, which were smaller shows and not, those top shelf shows.
Hmm.
But it doesn't mean they weren't good.
Right. Right.
But they brought them and they marketed in Edinburgh at the time. They said, hey, there's also this going on. I'm so glad you're here for the International Festival,
But come check us out.
but we're here
Yeah.
too. And that's what started this whole thing.
Wow.
And it's so funny because that original group called themselves Festival Adjuncts.
Hmm. That sounds so formal, so educational, so
Yeah. Well, it was 47, so
yeah.
it was maybe a different era.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they didn't call themselves the Fringe. The term Fringe was coined the next year because the Edinburgh International Festival happens and is still happening every year.
Hmm.
And so this same event happened again in 48, and again some other theater groups who weren't part of the International Festival, they came to do their shows as well.
Hmm.
And it was in 48 when Scottish playwright and arts journalist Robert Kemp coined the term fringe. And so that's when fringe started to get attached to this group of festival crashers. I mean, that's what they were. They were crashing this festival
That's wild.
and doing their own thing around this festival, and it became the fringe. So it started in 47 was the first time all of this happened, both the
Hmm.
Edinburgh International Festival and the corresponding fringe, or what became the fringe, started in 47. And it wasn't until 1951 that the fringe received its first formal recognition, and that was from a group of Edinburgh University students.
Hmm.
And what they did is they set up in the local YMCA, they set up cheap accommodation, cheap beds, cheap
Right.
food, and cheap drinks. Very affordable for these fringe companies, the theater people that were coming to perform,
Hmm.
the actors and the directors and the stage managers and all that group of people. So this was someplace they could come and eat for cheap and sleep and do their thing. So they could come and present at the festival,
Hmm.
or what was becoming the Fringe Festival was emerging at this point.
Right. Wow. 4 years, 4 short years. That's pretty amazing. You
4 short
know,
years that
yeah.
started to build, because at this point there were more than just 8 theater
Right.
companies coming.
Right.
Now there was getting into the dozens. It was still only dozens, but
Mm.
still
Yeah.
enough to warrant having some accommodation and some sustenance for these people
Hmm.
who were trying to show their wares as well.
Hmm.
So, and in 1955, we had the first version of the central ticket booking office, which was again run by university students. So, this is so that, and this is still true today, if you're going to the Fringe, you get your tickets. You can get them at the door if there's room,
Hmm.
but you book them through a central booking system.
So it's all individual. It's not like one price fits all type of thing.
No, the prices vary, but the prices then and still today are relatively low compared to regular everyday theater prices. So I think a couple years ago in my research, I found a couple years ago the most expensive ticket was about £30, which translates to about $39 US
Gotcha.
dollars.
Okay.
So I mean
Interesting.
that's cheap, and that was for a celebrity performance. A celebrity that was from anybody who follows stand-up comedy, especially British comedy. Michael McIntyre, who is a British
Right.
comedian and very
Hmm.
well known over there at least. And I
Yeah,
hear too. I
he's
think
funny.
some people know who he is.
Yeah, I think a lot of us know him too. Yeah, he's very funny.
Yeah, he's great. So he did a show at the Fringe. I think this was a report I saw from I think it was 2018, and that was he had £30 tickets, and that was like the most expensive the Fringe tickets have ever been. So they actually have a lot of free events, and they have a lot of pay what you can or what you want events, and then they have a set price, but it doesn't get very expensive. It can be anything from like £5 to obviously £30.
Hmm.
So compared to, I mean, even in our local theater scene, if you go to something at like say Center Stage or the Warehouse, you're paying between 30, 40, maybe even $50 depending. And then if you're going to something at the Peace Center, you're paying a lot more than that typically.
Right.
So because the ticket prices were low, obviously the performers and the producers and the stage manager and everybody involved with the show, they didn't get paid very much
Hmm. Right.
for doing them. So
Right.
hence the university students setting up cheap food, drink, and beds at the YMCA there in Edinburgh. So yeah, it's a fascinating history really. And then in 1959, so it took over 10 years for it to become a formalized producing organization.
Hmm.
So that in 1959, the Festival Fringe Society was formed or founded. And that is what is still today the producing organization for the festival. And they do all the administration for the event and organizing of the event. And that is also where you get your tickets. So that's your central ticketing hub. You go to through them
Hmm.
to get your tickets to the various shows that are on the docket. And
Okay.
that is a whole, oh, what is on the docket? Oh my goodness. It started out with 8 shows.
Right. And
Okay.
were these shows well known, or were these new shows, new works? I mean, does the festival focus on and upcoming works, or does it focus on, or is it a mix, or is it more well known pieces that are brought? I mean, what comes to the Fringe?
It's a variety of things.
Hmm.
And in that group of original 8, I don't know what all the shows were. Some probably were new works or original works or
Hmm.
devised works from those companies. But I know one of the popular shows on the docket from those original 8 was a play called Everyman,
Hmm.
which is a medieval play that a lot of us studied in school and has been in the theater canon forever. So, I think it's always been a mix of all kinds of stuff,
Hmm.
classics, new works, and in today's Fringe, it's going to be classics, new works, musicals, operas, clown, dance,
Huh.
other physical theater, puppetry, children's shows, cabaret, some of it a bit risque, even perhaps. Heavy dramas, weird
Hmm.
stuff, avant-garde, um, light
That's a whole
comedies. There's
category on its own. Weird
like
stuff, right?
weird stuff. That's a genre. Immersive events, promenade events, site-specific events, you name it. And there's a huge comedy component to the Fringe as well. There's a lot of stand-up comedy, a lot of kind of comedy cabaret type stuff where it might involve some music as well as comedy. There's a lot of improv, a lot of sketch comedy. That's a whole element unto itself. And there's everything from, like we were talking about Michael McIntyre and
Hmm.
celebrities. There's celebrity and top tier theater companies and top tier performers doing stuff, all the way down to local school productions and amateur or student groups or small potatoes, everything you can imagine, and people from all over the world.
Yeah.
So all kinds of different things come to the Fringe, and I think that's the beauty of it. Is such a range.
That first Fringe festival, you said was
Mhm.
8 companies, and how
Yeah.
long of a festival was this at that point? Like, was it a weekend, a day,
Well, now it's 3 weeks. Was it 3 weeks at the time? I think it's possible. I could never find confirmation on that. If anybody knows, let us know. If the original festival was 3 weeks long, I reckon it was at least a week, if not the 3 weeks, because they had several companies, and you'd need a chance for all these companies to do their
perform,
thing.
sure.
So yeah, now it's 3 weeks. So I reckon it was at least a week or two, or could have been the whole month of August.
Your
Um,
Southern's coming out there, Melanie, you
my
reckon?
Southern is coming out, I
I
know.
reckon it wa
I reckon. Actually, I didn't start using the word reckon until I was living in the UK because they actually use it over there
They
too.
do, and, they use it in Australia too. It was interesting,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's correct, yeah. How funny.
And now I use the word reckon. Um, and my accent is so messed up. My goodness. I've lived in so many places. I'm just a train wreck. So you might hear a little Scottish sound. You might hear a little New York sound out of me. You might hear a little Southern sound out of me. I don't know. I don't know what I am anymore. Anyway.
I hear you.
Um, so yeah. So okay, so skip forward to today. So the statistics I found on the 2019 Fringe Festival. So imagine this. You're starting out with 8 theater companies.
Right.
Here we go. 2019, there were over 300 venues.
Oh my gosh.
There were nearly 4,000 shows. And
That's
there were
incredible.
just over 3 million tickets issued
Oh
for
my
Fringe
goodness.
performances.
That's incredible. Do you have any kind of attendance record?
The only number I could find is the number of tickets issued,
Okay,
3
gotcha.
million.
Wow, it's
So
amazing.
I was also trying to find out because anybody who's been, or anybody who lives in Scotland, and especially in Edinburgh, would know that the month of August in Edinburgh,
It's gotta be a zoo.
uh, it is such a zoo. I mean, the city just swells. I
Mhm.
don't know by how many. I was trying to find a number, and I found an article about that whole thing about how the city is augmented during that time, but they couldn't really nail down a number because it's hard to gauge. But I mean, thousands at least, if not
Mm,
millions of people. Because
mhm.
keep this in mind, the the Edinburgh Festival Fringe runs along other festivals. So at the same time, in the month of August, you have the Edinburgh Art Festival, the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo, the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and of course, the Edinburgh International Festival.
Oh my
All
goodness.
that is happening along with the Fringe.
I bet the people that live there are, like, so glad when August is over, you know?
Well, see, here's the thing, because, and this is what's killing them this year, because all that was canceled this year. And
Right.
we're going to talk about how the Edinburgh Festival Fringe has moved online and what that looks like. But they've been around for well over 70 years now, and this is the first time they've had to cancel the actual physical in-person Fringe Festival, which is
Wow.
very sad, but it is what it is.
It
But the
is, it really
problem with
is.
this
Yeah.
is the city has taken a major economic hit because, as you can imagine, August is a huge financial boon for Edinburgh and for,
Mhm.
frankly, a lot of Scotland, because a lot of tourism happens in it. And let me say, it is a fantastic time to be in Scotland. The summer in general is a glorious time. If anybody is
Mm.
thinking about taking a trip to Scotland, The summer is the time to go. The weather is superb. It does not get hot as we sweat like crazy down here in the south. It's
Mm-hmm.
humidity. You don't have any of that in Scotland.
Hmm.
It is the weather is for me when I was living there in the summer, I pretty much even wore a light jacket in the summer all the time.
Hmm.
There were some days where it got hot enough I didn't really need a jacket. And depending on how you fare in temperatures, you may not need a jacket. The Scottish people weren't wearing jackets.
Right.
but it's cooler than it is here in most of the US. I mean even when I was living in New York City, August was in the city was a nightmare. It was so hot. It's
Right.
so humid. But you just don't get that in Scotland. It is glorious. And the sun comes up at like, I don't know exactly, but literally it's up by 5. Like
Oh
you're
my
in broad
goodness.
daylight somewhere at like 4 in the morning because it's so far north. And then it doesn't set until like 10 or 10:30 at night. I mean, you have
Wow.
tons of daylight hours during the summer and the weather's beautiful. And there's no part of Scotland that I visited that wasn't outstandingly beautiful. Okay,
Mm.
there might have been some neighborhoods I traipsed through, but in general, but in general, I mean, Glasgow is worth seeing. Edinburgh, of course, is worth seeing, and then the Highlands. Oh, stop! It's glorious. It's just so beautiful. I mean, they're different animals. The cities versus the Highlands is like very
Sure.
different landscape, obviously, but it is so beautiful. And the Isle of Skye, I took a trip out to Skye. Oh, it's just marvelous. If you could, so I'm now working for the Tours Board of
Yeah,
Scotland here,
I guess so.
but I really, really highly recommend going to Scotland in the summer. It is so fabulous. And if you go in August, you can hit all these festival activities happening in Edinburgh. Now, I'll say if you're going to go in August and you want to go to any of these festivals or just go to Edinburgh in general, you better book in advance because
Mhm.
I mean like a year in advance because it is really
Wow.
really hard to get hotel rooms in Edinburgh
Hmm.
in August. Forget it. I mean, if you haven't booked well in advance a hotel room or an Airbnb or wherever you're staying. And this is where circling back to talking about the people of Edinburgh. So the businesses love it because they get all this, the restaurants, the hotels,
Oh, I can imagine.
they're loving it because there's so many people there using their services and goods, purchasing. It's wonderful. But the residents of Edinburgh, a lot of them leave the city in August
Right.
and they go do their vacation somewhere else and they rent out their house
Wow.
and they can make some decent money, especially if they're in a really good location. They
Mhm.
can make some money if they live in an apartment or a house in Edinburgh, and they can do Airbnb or however they want to arrange it and rent their
Mm.
house out, and they'll fill it because there are people, visitors, patrons, but also all the theater company people,
They
all
pay for
the
their
actors.
vacation abroad by renting out their home, and
Yeah,
they go
seriously.
abroad and they Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll also say, the surrounding area gets booked out too. Even now, Glasgow is about 45 minutes away on the train. You can take a train between Glasgow and Edinburgh. That takes about 45 minutes.
Mhm.
Glasgow hotels also get booked up. So, because it's such an easy back and forth between the two cities. So if you can't get a place in Edinburgh, you might get a place in Glasgow and then just take
Sure.
the train ride over for the day to do the festival stuff. So the surrounding area gets booked up too. So it's worth noting that if you are going to do Scotland, especially Edinburgh, in August, which is again a beautiful time, but
Mhm.
make some plans way in advance
I guess
because you
so.
need to book this stuff.
But this year, you don't have to go. You can do it all online.
This year you don't have to go because it's yeah,
It's all
because they
virtual.
could, and it's I'm so sad that they couldn't do
Yeah.
because this is a really really big deal. The
Mhm.
festival. We can get into what it's like going there and seeing stuff and what it's like performing there and what it might be like if you're trying to produce something that's
Mhm.
going to go there. But this year, none of that's happening because of COVID. Thanks,
Right.
COVID. And
Yeah.
it's all online.
Which is amazing because it kind of broadens the scope for people that maybe would never get there, for the festival.
Yeah.
This gives them kind of a
Yes,
real taste of what's happening.
exactly. And that's the silver lining is that you have access now. So if you can't get on a plane and go to Scotland, you can still participate. Now, of course, it's not exactly the same,
No.
but you can still see some stuff and it's awesome. And we're going to talk about some of the online programming that's available.
Sounds good. So, Melanie, tell me, because you've been to the Fringe, what was it like, just being there?
Yes. So I was there 2 years in a row. I was there in 2009 and 2010. And
Wow.
in 2009, I was in grad school in Scotland, in Glasgow, and we did a show at the Fringe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we performed. Now, my performance experience at the Fringe was a little different from the typical performer experience at the Fringe because we did this very avant-garde reading of the script.
Okay.
So that's what we did, and we performed it. I think we had 2 or 3 public performances, so it wasn't a whole lot. Most people who book into the Fringe, they book for the whole 3 weeks and they're on a regular performance schedule and they perform usually maybe 7 days a week, but probably 6 days a week. And sometimes they do multiple shows in a day, depending. But a lot of times it's one show a day 6 days a week. That is the
Wow.
typical performance schedule, I
Mhm.
think, for most people going to the Fringe. If you've been to the Fringe, or if you spent a lot of time at the Fringe and you think I'm wrong on this, let me know. But I think from what I saw, that seems to be the normal schedule for
Mhm.
Fringe performances. But what goes around with that what surrounds that one performance, is a lot of hustling,
I
because
bet.
there are, what was the number, like almost 4,000 shows
Right,
in
yeah.
2019, so you're competing against all that.
Right, I mean,
So
they're all probably using, the venue is hosting multiple different productions, so
yes,
there's a lot of in and out and setting up and tearing down and all that
yes,
kind of thing. Mhm.
yes, it's much like, there's a lot of theater festivals that operate this way. If you've been to like a college theater festival or other kind of theater festivals, where the venues typically they want to book pretty much their whole day.
Mhm.
They want, the plays start in the morning and they go into late night.
Right.
And shows it's not set in stone, but a lot of you have to be accepted by the venue. We'll get into like the producing element of producing at a Fringe, but when you're filling out your application, you have to put the time of like the running time of your show, and they like it when your show's about 45 minutes.
Okay.
That's like the golden number. Now some shows are longer than that, and
Mhm.
that's cool. It depends on what the venue's after, but that is a favorite spot because then they can pack them in,
Sure, they
and
turn
they
it
can
over,
they
yeah.
can do it on every hour, and then you have like 15 minutes for flipping, or
Yep.
sometimes a half hour for flipping the venue to the next. And that being said, a lot of Fringe shows are very economic in their tech setup. They have to be. They don't. You
Sure.
don't see a whole bunch of like full scenery and
Right, no, I'm sure not.
lighting design and everything.
Yeah.
It is very much like, okay, this has to be very economic. I have a chair and a spotlight and go. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Right.
Like that's what you get.
Mm.
Um,
I
so
know
you
some
do have to
tech
be
directors that would love that.
right, exactly. So that, you have to be economic with your setup, and a lot of times the venue that you book into will tell you like this is what you get. You can
Mhm.
have X, Y, and Z, and that's all you can have,
Hmm.
because they have to flip the venue so much. So it's back to back shows pretty much, because they get more bang for their buck that way, obviously,
Absolutely, yeah.
because they're making money off the shows that are in there, the venues. So, and venues can be anything. They're not just theater spaces. Venues can be restaurants, bars, hotel lobbies, warehouses, people's apartments. Some shows were done in apartments or houses. They can be outside, they can be in parks, they can be in courtyards, they can be in the train station. There might be some rules against that, but it's like anywhere. I mean, shows are happening any and everywhere you can imagine. In retail shops, in tourist attractions, in college dormitories, in gymnasiums. I mean, anywhere. So,
Hmm.
and these venue managers, which are all often, I mean, venue manager, it sounds like such a showbiz kind of term.
Right.
They might just be the restaurant owner. It could be that simple.
Sure.
But in August, they turn their restaurant into a showcase showplace.
Yeah, I
they,
bet.
they do whatever they need to do. Now, a lot of these restaurant owners, they're selling food and the bar is open or whatever during the show, which is great because they're just making money while there's entertainment on a stage or whatever performance area they've arranged. So it's quite interesting. So where was I going with that?
Just the atmosphere and
The
yes.
atmosphere. Oh, so I was talking about the hustle because there's so much going on. So when you're not performing as a performer, a lot of times you and your fellow company members need to be out in the street hustling, like literally handing out flyers and talking up your show to passersby. And
Right.
there are a lot of passersby. And the most popular place to do this is the Royal Mile, which is the main drag in Edinburgh. It's called the Royal Mile because at one end of the street is Edinburgh Castle, and
Ah.
at the other end of the street is Holyrood Palace. So you've got these
Oh.
two like royal residencies and historic places,
Mm.
and that's why it's called the Royal Mile. But it's the main drag there in Edinburgh, and that is where so many people are. I
Yeah.
mean, it's wall to wall people. You cannot walk through there. It's like you're fighting through the crowds just to walk down the street. It's crazy. But that's where you go to flyer. You can flyer in some of the side streets and stuff too, but you need to go and like talk up your show and talk to people about it and hand them a flyer and encourage them to come. So you spend a lot of time doing that.
The streets must be littered with, like, stuff.
Yeah, probably. It's like there's so many people. I didn't even notice if there was trash.
Well, I just mean all the flyers too, that are gonna be about,
Oh,
just
yeah.
all of that
Yeah.
kinda thing. It's just amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And there's street performances too. That's another way to get attention.
Mhm.
Well, some people just do street performance. I mean, there's
Right.
just that. I mean, they don't even go to an actual venue. They just do street art. But sometimes people will do little commercials on the street for their show in a
Right.
sense. So they'll
Mhm.
do a scene or they'll do something related to their show to attract you to their show,
Right.
to try to get you into their actual show. So it's wild. So it's exhausting too because if you're performing, you're doing all that, and then you also want to go to stuff.
Right. You wanna take advantage of yeah, absolutely.
And there's also, on top of the 4,000 shows there are to see, there's also a lot of networking opportunity, as you can imagine. So there's networking events and talkback sessions and meet and greets and just, all kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
So a lot of theater professionals or theater artists will go to these various events and try to meet people and network. And then of course just the energy of the city at this time with so many people and so much going on, it's just draining in and of itself. So usually people are in a coma after their 3 weeks.
Oh, I
I
would
mean,
bet. I mean, you know how it is going to a conference of any sort for a couple of days,
yes.
It's the same kind of thing. You're just going trying to take advantage of as much opportunity as available to you, and yeah, it's just exhausting, but it can be exhilarating, I'm sure too.
Mm. No, and I think it's inspirational because you see so much cool stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
like I said, there's such a variety, and there's things you would have never thought about. So yeah, it's very inspirational. So and if you're a patron, it's equally exhausting
Right. Yeah, that's what
because
I was
there's so
just
much to
thinking
do.
of. Yeah.
But if you're a patron, I would highly recommend. Now, they usually produce, well, they always do. I don't know that they did this year because of what's going on this year, but they always produce a festival catalog
Hmm.
that comes out, and you can order one, and you can get one even here in the States. You can order it, and there's some places around the world, like obviously it's easier to get one in the UK, but
Right.
there's places like New York where you can pick up that they'll get a shipment of catalogs. You can go pick up a catalog. They're free.
Hmm.
And just to give you an idea, I have my catalog here from 2017, which I
Yeah. Right.
picked up. I didn't go to the festival in 2017, but I was in London, so I picked up a catalog.
Right.
Um, it's 456 pages.
Oh my gosh.
That's how how fat the catalog is. And this is like, it's 456 pages of, it's very similar to a phone book. I mean,
Oh my goodness.
there's, let me just look at it. Let me just have a look and tell you, like, so one page, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's 10 entries, 10 shows represented on each page, and there's
Wow.
456 pages.
That is incredible.
So, I mean, that just gives you an idea. So,
So you'd barely even scratch the surface, even if you went every day of the festival.
No,
Man,
you
yeah.
wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. So when I went in 2010, I went as a patron. I was living in London in 2010, but I went up to Edinburgh and stayed with a friend of mine. And so what I had to do before I went up there is I collected the catalog, because there were some places in London where you could collect one. And I had to sit there and go through it and look and say, okay, what shows interest me? So I took like little Post-it note sticky things, and like, this is interesting, and I'm making lists, and I'm like, okay. And then you have to go back and narrow it down, and then you have to look at the timing, and you say, okay, this show starts at 4 o'clock, so if I see that show at 4 o'clock, can I make my next show at 5:30? Where's the location? Can I walk from point A to point B in enough time to make the second show? So you really have to calculate what you're seeing, where it's located, and put it in line with everything else that you want to see. You got to
Yeah.
plan.
Sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It is logistic. And so you as a patron, to maximize it, you should do some planning ahead of time as well. And then of course you want to buy your tickets in advance most of the time, because stuff gets sold out. Even stuff that's kind of, you're like, nobody's heard of this show, nobody's heard of this company, nobody knows anything about this, it still might get sold out. It's kind of crazy. And also, some of these venues only hold like 10 people at a time.
Right.
So there's that too. So you have to kind of consider, like, there's such a range. I mean, obviously some of the venues are humongous and they hold 300 people or 500 people or whatever. And then if you're in somebody's apartment, or if you're in somebody's van, I've heard of shows in vans before. If you're in a van, it might be 1 or 2 people at a time, because you're sitting in a van with a performer doing a show.
That's
So,
bizarre.
no. So,
I'm going to a
it's
show.
like you have to.
Click, open the door, slide it shut. That's just bizarre.
Yeah. So, it depends on the venue. So, I highly recommend, if you know you want to see shows, plan out your days, and strategize. Like, okay, how long does it take to get from here to here? What time do these things? How long are they? Is this an hour-long show or 45-minute show, or is this one of those 2-hour ones? And figure it all out, and then you book the tickets. And then that
Wow.
might be something you have to take into consideration too. Like, what's my budget? Like,
Right,
okay,
sure.
I'm over here. And there are free events. So maybe if you're like over budget, you're like, okay, well, let me choose some free events to fill in the blanks here, because I have some space in my schedule. So what's free at this time that I could go to, because I don't want to spend any more money. So,
Right.
that's something you can do too. But it's amazing, wonderful. And the shows are hit or miss. Some of them are
Sure.
phenomenal, mind-blowing. Some of them you walk out and you're like, what was that? Like, that wasn't okay. Thanks for trying. Because you get such a range of everything.
Yeah.
But either way, it's inspirational.
Yeah.
Now, let me just briefly touch on what it's like to produce at the Fringe.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I have not actually taken a show as a producer at the Fringe, but I was planning on it one time. So I did a lot of homework and came up with some information and did a lot of figuring out. So when I was in London, there was another artist friend of mine, and we talked about maybe we should come up with an original piece for 2 actors, the 2 of us, and we should produce this and take it up there. Because here's the benefits. You talk about, well, what's the benefit? Exposure and putting that on your resume. And it's a good place to test run if you're
Sure,
devising or
absolutely.
working on a new piece. It's a great place to test run new pieces or devised work. And you can also get awards. Like, there's a series of awards. There's Fringe First Awards. There's the Perrier Award. There's the Scotsman Awards. So a lot of different companies, and Scotsman is a newspaper, so they give awards. So there's a lot of different groups that give out awards. So you can can get some awards, and then, on your show posters going forward, you can say, you can put those little, like the Cannes Film Festival.
Right. How in the
So,
world could they give awards at something like this? 4,000 things going on. I mean, come on.
well, obviously they have to curate some kind of
Yeah.
list. They
Yeah.
have to come up with some kind of list, and there's got to be some kind of criteria of
Mhm.
what, because you're not gonna put, a children's puppet show up against a stand-up comic.
No.
That's totally different animals.
Yeah,
So
I'd
you
say.
gotta kind of, I'm sure you come up with a criteria of, okay, this is what we're looking for.
Mhm.
But yeah, you can get awards and get exposure, and again, the networking, and then just being able to put that on your resume that you performed at the Fringe. That's pretty awesome
Yeah,
because
no.
it is an internationally recognized, the biggest festival in the world. Okay, so when I was doing my homework as a producer, when
Mhm.
we were looking at taking something up there are so many logistics you have to figure out. So you have to have your piece together, and it needs to be fairly put together by the time. You can't say we're planning on doing this.
Right,
No.
no. Yeah.
If you're doing an original piece that you have to devise, you better be, pretty close to done in that writing or devising process.
Mhm.
Or, if you're going to do something that you have to license that's copyright, you better have your license already. You better have all that stuff in order. You better know what you're doing,
Mhm.
because you have to get a venue. That's step one. I remember at the time, I don't know if it's changed, but at the time, I think it was around January or maybe even December, as early as December, you could start applying to venues
Mhm.
to get a spot. And that's another thing you have to research. You have to look at the venues. Some venues are obviously better than others.
Right.
There are some really popular ones, and if you get on their list, that's great because they do some marketing, and people know them. And then there's some like hole in the wall place that nobody's ever heard of. And then, some places have dressing rooms and lighting and all kinds of bells and whistles, and other places are literally an empty warehouse with nothing.
Right.
And, so you got to just look. And then of course the cost
Mhm.
and the agreement that you make with the venue. So typically there's a box office split, but that's not all of it usually, because often there is no box office, or there's very little
Right.
box office. So oftentimes there's like a flat fee on top of some kind of box office split.
Mhm.
So you might have to pay them a few $100s or whatever it is on top of,
Your
some
ticket
sort of
sale percentage, yeah.
40-60 split or something, whatever
Mhm.
the agreement is.
Mhm.
Um, so there's that. And once you get accepted by a venue, and you might have to apply to multiple ones, then you have to submit to the Festival Fringe Society.
Mhm.
So those are of course, we mentioned them before. They're the producers, the organizers of the actual festival.
Right.
So then you have to get your ducks in order with them, and there's fees, and you also have to submit artwork and all this marketing material for your piece, because and your blurbs and all your information, because it has to go into that catalog that gets printed as
Right.
well as online.
Mhm.
So you have to make your arrangements and take your agreements with them. So there's that element. And then you have to get there. And when I did the tally for, now we were in London at the time, so this was
Mhm.
in the UK, and we were looking at doing a two-person play
Right.
that we devised. So we didn't have licensing or anything.
Overhead's kind of low, yeah, right?
Yeah, so you would think that overhead would be low. Two people, original work, so no royalties, no licensing. You're in the UK. By the time I estimated printing flyers, all the fees and the travel and the accommodation and food and et cetera, and all the things you can imagine, I had a budget of about $10,000.
Shoot, wee, man.
So for two people. So it wasn't the cheapest thing. Now, that's not
No.
crazy. I mean, 10 grand
No, it's
isn't
not.
totally
No, it really
crazy.
isn't, but man.
But I was like, okay, I think this little adventure will cost us about 10 grand if we want to do this. Now, if you
Mm.
guys, if any of your listeners out there have actually taken a show to the Fringe, I would love to hear. And if you're willing to share your numbers with me, I would love to hear what it cost
Mhm.
you, and what size your show was and all those factors, and what you ended up paying. And tell me if you think I was way off on my estimate. But that
Mm.
was the estimate that I came up with, that it was going to cost about 10 grand. So you can imagine if you're here in the US and you're taking a show over there, then you have international travel on top of it. And
Hmm.
then, are you taking more people than just two? So you got to figure out, you got to augment based on your company. And
Right.
then you've also, the other factor that's a big issue for producers taking things to the fringe is storage of your stuff. So I mentioned that set and costume and tech seems to be pretty light for the most part at the
Mm-hmm.
fringe. It's not just because of the quick turnaround times in the venue, it's also because of storage, because there's no place to put all your props, costumes, and sets. And
Hmm.
if you're coming from another country, like if you're coming from the US and you're going over there, I mean, if you have to have an actual, say, an actual bed and a kitchen table, how are you shipping
Right.
that? And how much is
Right.
that going to cost you to ship a kitchen table, 4 chairs, and a bed? If
Mm.
that's your set or whatever. So shipping that over there might be crazy. One option is to see if you can buy those elements when you get over there. So that's a possibility. See if you need big set pieces like that, what can you buy
Right.
when you get to the UK?
I would think, yeah, that's most of what you'd want to do is probably pick up most things, unless they're really small items. Pick up most things, on
Yeah.
site.
The problem is a lot of shows that go over there have already performed, or they've already been designed and curated here and
That's
produced
true.
here. So they want to take that same show. And so you're kind of thrown in a bit of a wild card if you're like, okay, I don't know what this set is going to be. And you know how it is as an actor, Bruce. Like, if you get a different chair all of a
Oh,
sudden, like
yeah.
you got to you're already in a different space and you're already
Right.
exhausted. And now you've got different furniture that you're not used to. The height is
Yep.
different, or the style is different, or the comfort is,
Yep. That's
so
true.
it does throw a bit of a monkey wrench in there. It's not
Yeah.
impossible, but it's
No,
something to
no,
consider, all that.
absolutely.
So there's that. So I mean, you can, but then there's where do you store it when you're not performing?
Mhm.
That's an element because a lot of the venues they're not going to have storage space for you. If you're
Hmm.
lucky, you might get like a shelf in a closet for some props, know.
Wow.
But there's not a whole lot of storage usually. Again, you check with the individual venues, but and so how are you? Where are you storing it? And then when it's time for your show and it's time to load in, are you gonna have to rent a U-Haul to take it from some storage unit to the venue and then do the reverse at the end of your show? I mean, because that's gonna get expensive and cumbersome, and it's just gonna be an issue. And you may not
Yeah.
even be able to do that because again, the streets are so crowded.
Right.
Like, so there's all that stuff to consider.
Yeah.
It's not impossible. I'm not trying to scare people away, but there's
No, no, no,
there's
no.
a lot of elements to
Yeah, the
consider.
things you don't really think about, yeah.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
it's quite an adventure, the Fringe.
Oh,
It's
I
very
can only
cool,
imagine.
but
Mhm.
it's a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I was thumbing through the catalog and so on while we've been talking and stuff too, just kind of the catalog online so that I could kind of see, productions and so on that are there was just everything imaginable. I mean, you said there was variety, but until you really start looking at the topics and the titles and the pictures and the information attached to each one, it's just hard to imagine everything that they have.
Yeah, it's and of this year, of course, it's just a small fraction of what is normally offered because it's
Hmm.
digital, but it's crazy. There's still I don't know how many offerings. Do you think there's 100? You think there's 100 shows here that you can see online?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
I don't know what the exact number is, but yeah, there's quite a few things. So if you go to the Fringe website, and we'll link it below the podcast, but it's
Hmm.
listings.edfringe.com. That's where you can look at what is available online this year, and there's a huge variety.
There sure is. There sure is. Have you looked through the list yourself a little bit?
I have, and I know that if you notice on all the listings when you go to the website, you'll see that they're categorized: comedy, dance, physical theater,
Hmm.
circus, cabaret, variety, theater. So there's children's shows or family shows, and it's like that in the normal catalog, the print catalog that usually comes out. There's color coding
Right, right.
with all these different
Hmm.
categories. And but there's so much here. I mean, they've got all the categories, anything you can imagine in the kind of genre that you want, they've got it. So, Bruce, what were some of the ones that were kind of standout titles for you that you might be interested in checking out?
Well, first of all, I was kind of looking to see if there was anything that I could recognize, because you always want to see something kind of kind of clues you in and makes you feel like, oh, I know this, I know that. And first thing that caught my eye was The Importance of Being Earnest, which is a just a wonderful British comedy. And I
Hmm.
saw that that was being there. When I think of the Fringe, I think of that there might be things that everything would be new and fresh that I wouldn't be aware of, but to see something that I would be familiar with, I thought was kind of cool, and maybe what the adaptation of that would be. And they give you some really nice. Everything seems to have a page of its own too, to kind of give you a breakdown of what to expect from the production that's being presented. So it's kind of neat. If you're going through online, you can kind of get a really good look at what's going to be happening, what you're going to be seeing. So that was one thing that I saw that I thought was cool.
Yeah, that does sound cool. It's always good to see a classic. But I was just gonna explain a little
Hmm.
bit about what you can find online. So if you there's several pages, much like the catalog has multiple listings on a page.
Hmm.
And each listing will tell you the name of the show, the kind of genre of it, what category it is, and then it'll tell you if it's free or if there's a cost. And there's
Right.
I would say quite a few of these, if not every single one, but quite a few of them are free. They say free.
Hmm.
And then a lot of them say pay
Yep.
what you want. So
Yeah, that's
there are
interesting.
probably
Yeah.
some with a set ticket price, but a lot of them are pay what you want or free, which is awesome.
Hmm.
And then some of them are watch anytime, and they say this. They say watch anytime, which means they're probably a pre recorded thing, and you can go and click and see it.
Right. Right.
And then some of them are actual, they say virtual event. And I take that to mean that it's a live thing that's happening at a specific time. And then they have the date and time there that it will be performed. So you tune in at that time.
Hmm. So interesting. Actually, there was another one that caught my eye, I guess, because of my affinity with Australia. It's called A Diary of an Australian Outback Woman. And that's kind of the one that's going to be presented, I think. That's one's going to be presented at a particular time through Zoom. So they email you like a link the day of the
Oh,
production so that you
oh,
kind of
cool.
sign in, and that one I think is something you pay for. I think no, it's pay what you can. I think it's pay what you want almost. They have suggestions, of course. So it's kind of cool because that's a live, basically a live production that you're going to be witnessing, and that sounded really kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, here's a couple that I thought sounded cool. So there's one called Play in Your Bathtub.
I don't know. That just sounds nasty.
And it's free. It's a free event to play in your bathtub. So play in your bathtub. It's a, it's available August. Oh, it started August 8th, so it's available through the 30th. Okay, this is the blurb. The immersive audio spa for physical distancing in a site specific immersive experience taking place in your own bathtub. Join us for poetry, singing, and dances for small appendages.
Oh my gosh,
That just
that's
sounds funny.
crazy. It
So
does sound funny.
so I guess you get in your tub and you turn this on and you you enjoy the entertainment and you have little dances for your fingers and toes. And that sounds awesome. Okay, so here's another one that I think sounds hilarious. YouTube. And that's you as in sheep, as in EWE tube.
Oh my gosh.
So this is hilarious. This is a virtual event and it's free. So, virtual event, this happens at a specific time. It's a free event, but it happens at noon, 17th through the 22nd of August. So, I've got to tune into this. So, it says, immerse yourself in this epic multi camera mix, mesmerizing performances
Hmm.
from deepest Stirlingshire, which is, of course, a county, a region of the UK. Harmonized sheep choruses, amplified birds, and musical fences in this
Oh
in this
gosh.
enchanting natural symphony. So my guess is they're gonna turn the cameras on, some sheep in a field, and you're gonna watch it. And that
That
actually
is
sounds
wild.
fabulous to me. I don't know. I'm gonna have to watch this. I'll report back and let you know how the sheep are
Right.
doing.
We'll need a review, that's for sure.
I love sheep. Like they just make me happy. So I just want to see YouTube. YouTube. So I should also mention, so because it's had a time, and I think there were some times and some other things we talked about. So this is at 12 o'clock, 12 noon. So
Mhm.
please note that that is 12 noon UK time. So when you're
Right.
seeing the times on these listings, you're talking about UK time. So if
Mm,
those of us here in the US, you're gonna have to do the math and figure out what time that is for you. So
right.
that's gonna be I'm gonna have to get up to see the sheep because 12 p.m. Edinburgh time is 7 a.m. our time here in the upstate. So 7 a.m. 7 a.m. Do I want to get up at 7 a.m. to watch sheep in a field? I might. I might.
I saw another one you talked about that there's also, like, cabarets and that kinda thing.
Mm.
There's a neat cabaret style show, featuring Frank Sinatra, the music of Frank Sinatra and so on.
Mm.
So that's, another production that I saw that was being held. And that actually, it looks like this one is originating out of Adelaide, Australia, coming to the Fringe,
Oh, okay.
if I'm reading it correctly, but it looks interesting anyway. And whenever there's an iconic persona that they're presenting, it's usually, pretty interesting because they usually fill it in with a lot of story of the individual's life as well as the music. So it's a well-rounded type of presentation.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. I found some audio, like radio style theater, as well.
Mm.
That looked kind of cool. It's called The Mortal Coil. It's kind of a murder mysteries type of.
Mm.
Yeah. So a lot of unique stuff. I mean, a variety. A virtual magic show.
Oh, cool. So here's a dance and physical theater piece. It's called The Sun Inside, and it's a virtual event for free on Saturday, the 22nd of August, capturing the importance of sunlight during the lockdown period.
Interesting.
152 contributors from around the world share the sun inside their homes. That's cool. So we go
Mm,
into the homes of the artists and they do some dance and physical theater in relation to the light that's coming into their homes from the sun. That's really
hmm,
cool.
yeah.
I like it. So this is very cool. I'm very excited about YouTube and the other offerings at the Fringe.
Yeah. Well, and, and it's a great way again to still support artists, in this
Right.
time of where artists are not able to work like they have been, and they're needing the support of fans and as well as fellow artists supporting their work. So it's really just another way to do that and keep things going until we can see things live and in person.
Mm, indeed. Well, I think we better get cracking. I need to go to bed soon if I'm going to get up to watch the sheep.
Yes, you are. That'll be here before you know it. Well, fascinating this fringe thing. I'm thrilled that we could learn a little bit about it and what it all is, where it all came from, how it all started. Someday I hope to see it in person, but until then, I got my virtual ticket.
You got your virtual ticket. It's fabulous.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can't wait to tune into some of these. So it's been an interesting time for artists during quarantine. We're finding
it sure
ways.
has.
The arts are finding
Yeah,
ways.
they are. It's really incredible. Yeah, I'm just glad that people are making the effort to find ways to keep things going and to develop new content and to bring it to the masses again. Who knows how this will impact when things are again live and in person. People that are exposed to have been exposed now to the arts through quarantine, maybe because they maybe didn't have an opportunity or couldn't afford or what have you. Now they might have a whole new appreciation and want to become involved and want to see things in a live format, once we can.
Yeah. I think it's gonna be an amazing marketing tool.
Well, you're right, Melanie. It is probably time for us to head to bed so that we can get up to see the sheep and a
Yes.
variety of other performances that are going to be happening soon at the festival.
Or for those of
Um,
you who don't want to go to bed yet, draw a bath. because
Yeah, there you go. And get
there's a
prepared for the
show.
get prepared for
There's a
the
show for your bathtub.
I don't know. I don't know. Oh goodness.
Okay,
Wow.
Bruce. Well, we'll
All
leave it
righty.
there and we'll
Okay.
check in on other topics and other wonderful things to talk about next time.
Absolutely. Take care. Good to talk to you.
Okay, bye bye.
All right, we'll see you. Bye.
Thespis in the Green Room is a Courageous Crossings production. Music used in this podcast is licensed by ASCAP and BMI.
In Edinburgh, I used to know a lass with an air, and her name was Jo. And every night at 10, I would meet her in the glen. But now I'll not see her again, especially not in the glen at 10. For now across the green,